Shalom. I just came from a meeting with the Chicago Board of Rabbis and Cardinal George, the Cardinal of Chicago. He's a very impressive guy, 2 PhDs, and just loved listening to him talk. He talked, of course, about Catholicism and about Catholic-Jewish relations, and I wanted to report on some of the things that he said. First of all, in terms of one of the controversial things, which is he's now the newly elected president of the Council of Bishops for America. Evidently, they had a paper where they talked about how Catholics should take certain issues into regard in voting. He said, voting's a moral choice. When you make a decision, decisions have consequences, and everybody has to decide on what basis they elect someone. As Catholics, we have an obligation, as Catholic teachers, to teach what our tradition says. Don't know if anybody listens. I'm sure even among the bishops, people will vote differently, but that's part of our obligation. And the head of the Chicago Board of Rabbis said it came in the context of a brilliantly written 44-page document that's well worth reading. Then he talked about the Catholic bishops themselves and how they conduct dialogue. It's interesting, he said that there's basically 2 committees, one that deals with interfaith relations that has this dialogue with Muslims and Baha'i and other groups, and then there's the Ecumenicism Committee, which deals with other Christian groups and the Jews. So that was very interesting. He's going to Israel for the first time in years, coming up soon, and he's going to monitor carefully the statements that come out after that. He brought up the topic himself, and then there was questions about this new controversy about the Latin Mass being reintroduced, and in Good Friday, evidently there's a passage that calls for the conversion of the Jews. He said he's opposed to that, that it should be removed from the liturgy, and he had an audience with the Pope, with the other cardinals this past weekend, and he specifically asked the Pope to remove that from the liturgy. Didn't get an answer yet, but he's definitely on that side. And then the issue of salvation, he said that's mostly a Protestant issue. Catholics are not totally concerned with that. It's a way of life, like Judaism. He said, and what happened was Martin Luther was obsessed about his own salvation, and he said he blew up a few verses from the New Testament, which made that a much bigger issue than it historically had been. He said he believes that Jesus is the Savior of all humankind, and so human beings should know their Savior, which of course Jews disagree with. But he said that he reaffirmed the Vatican II message that Jews have an eternal covenant with the Jewish. God has the eternal covenant with the Jewish people, and that he doesn't see Catholicism now as supersessionistic, which means replaces Judaism, but as a successor, or as a continuity, he said. Very interesting. Then on the issue, one of the questions raised was that there was evidently a sermon in front of the Pope by a high-ranking priest at Easter time where he talked about the collective guilt of the Jews and complicity in the death of Jesus, raising that as 2,000-year-old historic canard. Well, what Cardinal George said to that was that Jesus was a Jew, he lived among Jews, he had some enemies, as we all do. Some enemies were Jewish, some were Roman, but you can't blame, there's no collective guilt, you can't blame everybody for a few people not liking him, and that Vatican II completely rejected the idea of Jews as complicit in the death of Jesus. So should we. It was overall a very positive session. I've never seen such a big turnout from the Chicago Board of Rabbis. Everybody was there on time. Clear to hear a remarkable man who gave us this tour de horizon of Jewish-Catholic relations.